Welcome to the inaugural episode of Your Authentic Executive. I'm Dr. Janine Peak Emsick, and I am thrilled to have you join me on this journey of discovery and growth. Here on Your Authentic Executive, we believe that the heart of leadership lies in the stories that we live. After more than 3 decades of executive coaching and consulting, along with teaching leaders at both the MBA and doctoral levels, I've come to understand that the most powerful lessons come from mining the gold in our own life stories. Each month, we'll feature the story of an inspiring executive, delving into the pivotal moments and life lessons that have shaped how they lead today. And leading up to these rich narratives, I'm excited to introduce you to our Your Authentic Executive Sparks. These are 3 powerful lessons lifted from an executive's life that will light the way to our upcoming podcast. If you want to be the first to hear about new episodes of Your Authentic Executive and these illuminating sparks, be sure to follow me on LinkedIn or sign up for our mailing list at yourexecutivecoach.com. I can't wait to share these stories with you and explore the authentic leadership that lies within each of us. Welcome to Your Authentic Executive, storytelling interviews that engage, inspire, and connect us through the real life stories of the individuals who lead us on a daily basis. And today I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Pat Kearns. Pat Kearns is a physical therapist, and she is president and CEO of the multiple-time Best Places to Work award-winning QLI. QLI stands for Quality Living Incorporated. So Pat, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Janine. Always a pleasure to have a conversation with you.
Oh, thank you. So we're going to start with a little bit of Pat's backstory, because as you know, we believe that we lead out of our life experience, and learning about our featured executive's life experience helps us in insight on not just how they lead, but on how our life stories might be impacting how we lead. And so, Pat, you are from the boondocks. Tell us where you're from.
I am. I'm from God's country out in rural western Nebraska, a lovely town called Gordon, Nebraska. Just about 15 minutes south of the South Dakota border, south of the Pine Ridge Reservation.
And tell me a little bit about what your earliest years were like.
Oh boy, growing up in a small town, especially back in the late 70s, the 80s, the early 90s, it was such a wonderfully safe community. We didn't have technology back then, so we weren't inside in the summer like my kiddo is, wanting to be on the iPad or watching Netflix or anything like that. We were outside on our roller skates or on our bikes, heading to the pool, heading to play t-ball or softball, depending on the age, and running around town with our friends. But just a lovely small community that had a lot of safety and a lot of opportunities to really engage.
So kind of the year you were born, this was what was happening in the world, like our arts and our media. The TV shows were Good Times and Chico and the Man and All in the Family and Barbra Streisand's The Way We Were album. But at the same time, it was the year that Nixon resigned his presidency, and Patty Hearst was taken hostage, and that these were some of the stories that were featured in the headlines that we experienced. And in the midst of all of this, in your earliest years, look at you smiling. Tell us what's happening in this picture. Who is there?
Well, those are my 2 younger sisters, Lisa and Brenda, and my mom's modest little flower garden outside of the front of our house. But I remember spending a lot of time in that front yard doing gymnastics, playing kickball with the neighbors, again, roller skating out in the middle of the street. At some point, we had a big boom box, that took, I think, 8 D-sized batteries to power. And, we'd listen to Michael Jackson or whatever popular music was happening at the time.
And I can't help but resist. This is you in the middle of this photo, but I just, Billy Ray Cyrus was big at the time, and you just look like his twin or his sibling at least.
Oh, I loved my mullet. I didn't know any better, but I loved it.
So tell us, this is your mom surrounded by the girls. Tell us a little bit about your mom.
Yeah, I love that station wagon. And I have to call out that the next phase of hairstyles for my sisters and I were the home perm. So I can't miss that opportunity. But yeah, my mom was the full-time working mom, which I think latchkey kid was the term maybe used back at that time for my sisters and I. And so she was a really hard worker, a very generous person, and did everything that she could, within a relatively poor household to provide for her kids and make sure that we had opportunity.
My recollection is that your heat for your home was provided with a wood burning stove. Am I correct?
That is right. Yeah, my dad worked for the Nebraska Public Power District, so he was keenly aware of the cost of electricity. And again, for the need to be frugal in our household to make ends meet was important. And so, when we moved to Gordon, when I was about 4 years old, from a neighboring small town, he bought a house that had a wood burning stove in the basement. And growing up, you can see all girls, no boys. My dad had always wanted a boy, didn't have one, and so decided that as the oldest daughter, that I would need to take on the responsibilities he had in mind if he had a boy. So that meant in the summer we would get up early on the weekend and head out and chop wood and haul it back to the house. And that way, in the winters, we could also get up early on the weekends and haul in that wood to the basement to fuel the wood burning stove so we could use as little electricity as possible. I smile now because, I know that that kind of work was good for me. And I can hear my dad's words coming out of my mouth with my own child as I'm trying to teach her responsibility. And as he would say, character that comes with hard work. But oh, I sure did not like getting up early in the summer or the winter to do anything with chopping or hauling wood at all. And in fact, I remember I was a teenager, in high school, freshman, sophomore year, that one Sunday morning, after a long day, probably at a track meet or whatever sport I was doing, he insisted that we get up, and I insisted this has to be child abuse, and he said, "Go ahead and call the authorities, but until then, get out of bed. This builds character." That was his favorite line. This builds character, and it did.
That's
It did.
one of the kind of thematic quotes that you've shared is hard work builds character. And that comes from your dad. Uh, this is your grandma. Tell me a little bit about the influence that your grandmother had in your life.
Yeah, both my grandma and my grandpa on my mom's side were very, very present in the lives of my sisters and I and our cousins as well. But with two working parents, my mom needed for us to be somewhere at a younger age and just needed some extra support along the way. And my grandma Fanny and my grandpa Wilbur were just really present to be a house where we could have childcare. So we spent a lot of time before school years at their home and over the summers. And my grandma was such a wise person. So, in that process of spending a lot of time with her, we built a nice relationship. And she was really somebody that I could turn to for support and for advice. Again, her constant presence in our lives was a really important part of my upbringing, and the same for my sisters.
Mm. And you have a theme actually of several folks who played a key role in your life. And one of the things that you've shared is as you looked at your life when you were like 13 or 14 or 15, you were kind of reflecting on um, what role do you want to play in driving the future of your life? Do you remember the kind of the thought process that you were going through at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely this started with my grandparents, but again, with two working parents. And, I grew up in a household that didn't always have great stability. My dad struggled with alcohol at times and, is since doing well. But, as and everybody has challenges that they navigate at a personal level.
Yeah.
And so, but through some of those really key formative years, I really looked outside of our home for support and, what I would now call mentorship. I didn't have that word back then. And I was really lucky to find it. I suppose, I don't think this happens just in small towns, but for me, the bliss of being in a small town and being able to be surrounded by people who cared about me and who were willing to invest in me. So certainly that started with my grandparents. And then fast forward to about my middle school years. one of the first key influences in my life was my junior high math teacher, Mrs. Morris, Terry Morris, who's on the screen. And I remember coming into seventh grade, the start of middle school for us at that time, and navigating personal struggles, but not really having a clue about my future. And Mrs. Morris was one of the first people who expressed that she believed in me. And it was by way of my math skills. She complimented me on those skills, gave me an opportunity to jump ahead a grade in math and to do some more advanced things. And it was really the first time that I remember somebody overtly saying that I was good at something, and that they believed in me. And it seems like a small thing, but I just remember the power that that had on helping me believe in myself and to start thinking about my future in a way that I could do something or be something that maybe I had never considered before, and maybe didn't see around me in that way either.
And that leads to another influence in your life, Mr. Robinette.
Yeah. Fast forward to towards the end of my seventh grade year, Mr. Robinette was the junior high track coach. And I think he had learned this wisdom over the years, but at the end of the year, engaged myself and some of my classmates to participate in track and junior Olympics over the summer. And that was great because it gave us something to do and kept us out of trouble. And I have no idea how much trouble I might have gotten into in those early years, but I know this was a key thing that kept me out of trouble. But he was also someone that became a really present person in my life in the way of engaging me in an activity that I had never considered before. I'd never run before. My parents didn't participate in track, didn't really know anything about it, but he was willing to invest the time in me and my classmates and in teaching us. I was a high jumper after that, but teaching us how to jump, how to run. And, again, really just overtly expressing, hey, I believe that you have the potential to be good at something. Let me coach you. And I was open to learning and eager to learn at that time. And let me help push you along the way so that you can see the work that's going to need to be put in order for you to be successful at this. And so again, between Mrs. Morris and Mr. Robinette, having somebody who saw the potential in me and my classmates maybe before we saw it in ourselves, but then was also willing to push us outside of our comfort zone so that we really understood kind of the grit that we'd need to have in order to achieve success. And so those were my earliest years of having this sense of accomplishment and just how that can fuel you to want to accomplish and achieve more. It's getting an early taste of that.
In high school, and it's an intersection of the Miss Nebraska pageant with your trajectory for your career. And so, tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, I was not Miss Nebraska. We should just clarify that right away. But about that time, there was an individual who was Miss Nebraska, who was an alum of Gordon High School. She had gone on to receive her degree in physical therapy, and she moved back to Nebraska after practicing a couple of years to start her own practice, start her own business. Her name was Kim Marlette. And I remember when Kim moved back to town, she was kind of a legend in Gordon. She was a great basketball player in addition to being Miss Nebraska. I think what I loved about her is that she could be a tough athlete while also, achieving something that required you to put on a dress. I thought that was cool. But what really stood out to me is, growing up back in those days, if I looked around town at the careers, the doctor, the president of the bank, the pharmacist, they were all men. And so this was my first
Mm.
experience of seeing a female as a leader, as a business owner. And that really, really captured my attention and gave me the sense that, wow, maybe that's something that I could do too. Again, I'd already, went down the path, thanks to Mrs. Morris, Mr. Robinette, of wanting to achieve in athletics, wanting to achieve in academics, and knew I was going to college. I was the first in my family to go to college. But this also gave me some direction as far as wanting to be a physical therapist and maybe a glimpse of wanting to be a leader in some capacity.
Mm. So, um, you started out at Doane College, is that right?
Yep.
And was it after 3 years of that you were accepted to medical school at the Med Center at University of Nebraska Medical Center?
Yeah, I had a great experience at Doane College, just built some amazing friends that are friends for life. And then after my junior year, I had a chance to go to physical therapy school to the physical therapy program there at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, which I was really grateful for. I was paying my way through school. So to shave off a year of undergrad and the cost associated with that was a really big deal for me at the time.
So moving forward included kind of initially working in Phoenix for a period of time, and then you came back to Omaha to attend a conference because your sister was working in Omaha. Am I correct? And you came to visit your sister. And at the conference, you had an opportunity to meet yet another key mentor in your life. Tell us about Kim.
Yeah, I lucked out at that conference in meeting somebody who worked at QLI and they loved their job so much. I thought it was the strangest thing that anybody could love their job so much. To me, work was about earning a paycheck in those early years. And this particular therapist who was at the conference finally, after a lot of persistence, talked me into coming to visit QLI before I headed back to Phoenix. And so I showed up that Monday after the conference at QLI. Um, I wasn't super excited about visiting QLI. It's a nursing facility serving individuals that had a lot of need. I was doing orthopedic sports medicine in Phoenix. And even though I wasn't particularly happy, I had been maybe convinced that that was the path that I was supposed to be on in my career. So I show up at QLI and I'm just immediately in awe. The campus is beautiful. Everybody's smiling, which seems so interesting to me. People who have had really traumatic injuries, a brain injury, a spinal cord injury, that they were smiling and that they seemed happy, and the team members seemed happy, and the place just had this energy about it, and that was just this awesome positive vibe like I'd never experienced anywhere else. And so the therapist Jody, who I had met at the conference, took me to meet with Dr. Hogabeen, who was the founding president and CEO of QLI. And, the rest is kind of history. I remember meeting him and he's so charismatic, such a good speaker. And I was in awe of already my experience at the place, curious about why this individual I had met loved her job so much. I was such a fanatic. And then to hear Kim talk about culture and rehab and how those two things come together to create the environment that I was experiencing, I was really in awe. So I did go back to Phoenix. It was snowing in Omaha when I was visiting. I went back to sunny Phoenix, thinking, yeah, I'm staying in Phoenix, but I was lucky enough to get a job offer from Kim that persuaded me to move back to Omaha in the middle of winter and take a job. It was a huge leap of faith at the time. It was a pay cut, and it was something that I knew I didn't know anything about. I didn't have any skill sets in neuro rehab, so I had no idea what I was doing. So it was a huge leap of faith to say yes to that job offer.
So early in your time with QLI, there was a time when you came to the place where you would do your work, and there was an envelope sitting in your workspace, and so what impact, Pat, has that note that you received from the CEO of your organization as a very, very early physical therapist, right? Or early in your career with QLI? What impact did that note have on you?
It really taught me the power of gratitude. And, if I dial back to what I experienced in junior high and the power of people believing in you, take that a next step and the power of people being grateful for you and the work you're doing it's just so powerful. It makes you feel valued and respected and like you're part of a team, a community, and being part of a community where there is gratitude. Yeah, for me, it helped me realize that maybe I could go make more money somewhere else. Maybe I could work less hours somewhere else. Why would I want to do that when I get to be part of this really special place where I feel a sense of belonging and I know I'm contributing?
Okay, so But when I've asked you this in the past, and I say, so tell me what you're doing right now in what is your current gratitude practice? What would you share?
Writing notes and sharing gratitude. So passing along what we call secondhand compliments. Supervisors or team members will share something nice about their team members with me, and then I get to pass along that compliment and gratitude to those individuals. It is absolutely the best part of this job for sure. So we have a really good routine of expressing and sharing gratitude at QLI, which means in any given week, I have about a dozen gratitude notes to write to people. And so I keep notes in my purse, by my bed, on my coffee table, across my office, everywhere, along with a number of ink pens, so that at any spare moment, including when I'm sitting at a stoplight, I can jot down a note to pass along to someone. But I really know how much that note from Connie to Kim and then to me meant to me at a time that I was really doubting myself and my place on the team. I know how much that note meant to me. And so I understand how important it is to make sure that those notes get passed along to other people as well.
I just love that. And if your purse was with you, I would ask you to look in it and you'd start pulling out the notes that you're in the middle of writing. And so
I'm
it
gonna do
really is,
that.
it is an authentic practice of yours, part of your A game practice. So just a picture of some of the things that happen at QLI, and those of you who are watching and listening, I can't encourage you enough to check out their website, visit the campus. Groundbreaking work in serving individuals who are seeking a quality of life after significant brain injury, spinal cord injury. Anything else that you now would consider part of your core repertoire at QLI?
Between brain injury, spinal cord injury, we serve a number of young adults who have unfortunately suffered a stroke. We do serve some individuals who have had an amputation, as well as individuals that may be experiencing chronic pain and trying to get off of the narcotics that were probably part of their early treatment. So it all fits together under this bucket of our proprietary clinical model called tridimensional rehabilitation, where we have the opportunity to make sure we're addressing the health and well-being of individuals. We're tapping into the principles of neuroplasticity that we know so much more about over the last 20 years, so that we can help people experience as full of a physical and cognitive recovery as possible. And then all of that fits under the umbrella of helping with the emotional recovery after a traumatic injury, and making sure that we're helping individuals build hope and optimism for their future. In addition to the power of gratitude, the importance of optimism is something that I've really had a chance to learn at QLI. And from that first experience when I stepped on campus and seeing everybody smiling, but just feeling this powerful energy, which I now know was this combination of gratitude and optimism, it's really helped me move from, I would say when I started at QLI, maybe kind of a glass is half empty kind of person, to really solidly being a glass is half full. Optimism is such an important part of my mindset, and in part of the QLI environment as well.
You used a word that's a really important word that captured my attention. And when you've come and spoken to the Change Leadership MBA course that I facilitate each year, it has captured the attention of young professionals, and that is neuroplasticity. And many of us may not have heard what that is. And it has a role in both your treatment of the guests in your facility as well as culture building in your organization. Could you succinctly describe what in the world is neuroplasticity?
Yeah, it's just this idea that our central nervous system, our brains, are not fixed. They are adaptable based on the demands that we place upon them or don't place upon them. But the idea that our neurons are wired together to give us certain skill sets or belief systems, but we can rewire our brain to build more skill sets or different skill sets, or have a different outlook on life. And tying the themes of believing in someone, with now neuroplasticity, and knowing that really truly anyone can learn to do anything, if they're willing to put the work into it and they're willing to be coached. Certainly I acknowledge with that, part of what holds anybody back from learning, is that we all have interferences, which could be emotional, could be financial, could be otherwise. I think about the individuals we serve at QLI, and the interferences caused by an injury that might be medical or physical in nature. There are times that overcoming interferences, may not be possible. But thinking of you and me and the team members that we have at QLI, if we understand that our brains can rewire, and that we really can learn anything that we set our minds to, that's a powerful feeling. That's a sky's the limit, idea that we all get to embrace.
One of my favorite examples of that, that's from a book that you actually shipped to me when I expressed my interest, um, was that we think when there's a stroke or somebody has a what used to be called a learning disability when I was a young person. So many things that we say, your brain is just that way and you're stuck. That one of the clearest examples that proves that false is something that we're all familiar with, the cochlear implant. And the
Mhm.
cochlear implant stimulates a part of the brain that isn't designed to hear, to facilitate hearing in a person who has lost their hearing. And that same principle applies to learning a skill, learning optimism, breaking cynicism, all kinds of things that make our quality of life better, whether it is a physical challenge like the folks that you are initially experiencing, the whole person, or it's something we're trying to figure out to make our careers more effective. And so I got to thank you for that introduction. It has been transformational, for me. And so, as a physical therapist, you were selected to be the second president and CEO of QLI, and you followed in Dr. Hogamin's footsteps, and have led an organization that, as I have my understanding, the lore is, Pat, that you guys won the Best Places to Work award so many times that they just gave you a lifetime achievement award so someone else could win, so another organization can win. And so you have taken this idea or this practice that uh, begins kind of in a medical arena, a clinical arena, and said, we are going to be best in how we work together in serving the folks that are part of our campus there. So, with that, if you were to think about, like, what would you say are the connections that you might make from your earliest years, your foundational years, with how you lead today and how you've led through your career?
Yeah, I have learned as a leader that we have this grand opportunity to believe in people. I've talked about that a few times, just the power of people believing in me, seeing potential in me before I saw it in myself, and the path that it put me on to where I am today. And, with an understanding and a belief in neuroplasticity, and that anyone can learn to do anything, as leaders, have the opportunity to kind of kick that off for the individuals in our organizations. And I really firmly believe at QLI that anyone who walks through our doors could be our next CEO. They have the potential to develop the skills if they're willing to put the work in, if they're open to coaching. They have the potential to be the next CEO. I certainly know, if when I was in junior high or high school or finishing grad school, I never imagined that I would have the skills to do this job, to be the leader of such a special organization. And, at those times, I didn't have the skill sets to do that, right? And so being able to come into QLI under Dr. Kogabean's leadership, and his willingness to see potential in people, his willingness to see potential in me, and to create a culture of that, so that all of our leaders are seeing that potential in the individuals that we supervise. I was lucky certainly to find QLI by chance, and to be immersed in this environment. And so my goal is to make sure that I pay that forward, that I believe in every individual who comes through our doors, that they can continue to grow, um, all the way up to potentially being the next CEO.
So, uh, this is a picture of you and your husband, just stunning, at your wedding. And I love this picture of your quote, two kids. You have worked really hard to maintain work life balance. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I really feel lucky that work is such a part of my life. So I don't know that I find on any given day that I'm having to distinguish between the two. I love my work. I love the team members I get to show up and work with every day. I learn something new from someone, if not several new things from several people every single day. And it is a really important part of my identity. Obviously, being a mom, Roxy, my 13-year-old chocolate lab, and my daughter Carson, who's now 11. I love this picture from several years back, though. But being a mom is also an important part of my identity, and I think I'm a better mom because I am a leader and I'm a happy team member and happy with my career. And I think I've probably become a better leader and a better team member by being a mom as well. And so those two things are really integrated for me. Now, I will admit, just so I don't sound too much like Pollyanna, that I wished I had more hours in my day to do more of both. So there are obviously times that, I'm at home being a mom and I kind of have work things in the back of my head and vice versa. But I wouldn't trade having both for anything in the world. And I really do think that they blend together to be one. And I love that we hear more often these days, instead of having a work life balance where maybe the old connotation of work life balance was that life is good and work is bad. Again, I don't feel that way. I think both can be good. If your work's not good, you should find work that is good, so that those two can blend together. But I do like hearing the phrases, work life integration or blending of work and life, more and more, as we have more women in the workforce and juggling being a mom and having a career.
Deloitte, some research that came out of Deloitte during COVID really challenged this idea of work life balance and kind of posited, hey, we've certainly learned there's no such thing because we're all working from our kitchen tables or wherever we were working. And they started using the word well-being. And
Mhm.
what does well-being mean? And they recommended that because many times employees are thinking it's my manager's job to make sure that I have well-being, and so they expect you to figure out how they will have work-life balance. And and the recommendation from Deloitte was, what are the dialogues you're going to have with your team members where you can talk about what does well-being look like for you and how can we move towards that together because it's going to be different for everybody. And so I love your modeling of how you have made that uh, work for you, work for your family, with all of the discomfort that comes with figuring out the realities of life and work. So I want to talk about a couple of quotes that you have shared that have been important to you. And once I asked you, what would you say to someone who is discontent with their job, with their relationship ending, and what wisdom would you lend? And do you remember what your response was?
Well, I think it was something along the lines of, don't be content with your dissatisfaction. We're all affected by adverse situations. And adversity really truly becomes an opportunity to learn and grow. Every ounce of adversity I've had in my life, I wouldn't wish for it again. Don't get me wrong. I think of COVID and the pandemic, as maybe a most recent one, but it truly does become an opportunity, for us to learn and grow. And while we can all be vulnerable to some degree to our circumstances, um, we do have a choice to move forward. So if we're just content with, here's the circumstance and I'm not happy and I don't want to be here, there is going to be no forward progress. But if we're willing to adopt this mindset that, hey, I'm not satisfied with this. And even when things are going well, we can have this mindset like, hey, I'm not satisfied with this. I'm going to work hard to continue to pursue excellence and to make things better. So I do think this mindset that, from a work perspective, Dr. Hoagveen instilled in us this never quite satisfied mindset, that there's always an opportunity to get better. There's always an opportunity to get better. And if we're really passionate about excellence, which is not the same as perfectionism, but if we're really passionate about pursuing excellence, having this never quite satisfied mindset will move us forward in the good times and in the bad times.
Mm. There's another quote that you've used that talks about what you believe about people. So, if you were to describe what you believe about people, what would you say?
Again, I really, back to neuroplasticity, anything, anything is possible. And I believe people should have this mindset about themselves and their circumstances. And again, as leaders, we should have this mindset about what's possible for the people around us. And I truly believe that anything is possible if you're willing to very intentionally put forth the effort, be open to learning, and adopt a positive mindset about it.
You've applied that to whether or not you believe you could actually have a professional golf career.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know neurologically that I absolutely, and I'm not a good golfer. It's been, since before I had my child that I golf consistently. So I'm quite a hacker. But if I wanted to be on the women's PGA tour, I could learn how to do that. I'd have to sacrifice a lot. The time that it would take, the financial resources it would take would be immense. But I know it's possible if that's what I chose.
Work with support, with training, and sacrificing the things that might be impediments. Is that the phrase that you used? Impediments that everybody
Yeah. Yeah. Being able
interferences.
to
Yep.
overcome experiences. Yeah. And, I'll say that, we're in such a society that we still have this language around people who achieve a level of expertise that we're in awe of. So we say that they're a natural born tennis player, a natural born golfer, or natural born leader. And, the truth is that's really kind of an insult to any of those individuals. People may be born with tendencies that lean them in a direction of physical achievement, or whatnot. But that does not that does not trump this idea of effort and repetition and intensity and a process of learning to move people forward. So everybody that we see that has achieved a level of success and expertise that we're in awe of, they have put the work into it. They've been open to the coaching. They've been willing to work on their mindset to believe that next level is possible. So it's really there's no one out there that's just naturally born to do something.
And it connects. It's interesting because it kind of connects very much to part of your early story of what your dad would say, that hard work builds character, hard work builds skills, hard
Yeah.
work builds mindsets, hard work builds teamwork, and so it's interesting how that connects back to some of your early story. Another, this is
Right.
another quote that's important to you is the path of pursuing excellence is conflict. I find this really important because most people believe that conflict, or many people believe that conflict is something to be avoided at all cost. And maybe not just if conflict is present that I avoid it, but I got to do everything I can possibly do to avoid the presence of conflict with others. And can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, it's something that I've had a chance really to learn at QLI, starting under Dr. Hoagveen's leadership. But change, the process of change and growth is conflict. And so if you don't have conflict, there is no change or growth or progress or the possibility of pursuing excellence. And so not all conflict is bad. I think when we think of conflict, we think of the icky personal conflicts, that might come with people disagreeing about something in a really unhealthy way. But, having conflict around, ideas or circumstances has to happen in order for progress. I even think back to my crossroads at the end of my first year of grad school, right? That was conflict. I was not performing how I needed to perform in order to stay in the program. And so here is this conflict. And I have to choose between, quitting and going a different direction, or buckling down and doing things differently so that I can learn and grow and move forward with the program. And so I think at times we just don't even realize throughout our day there's all sorts of conflict, conversations that we're having and we're working through. And when we can really see that conflict as good, and also be committed to making sure that that kind of conflict stays intellectual and it doesn't turn emotional and icky. So if we can be responsible for engaging in the conflict, keeping it intellectual, really amazing things can happen. And it's the privilege I have at QLI that I get to see every day as our teams are coming together, making this commitment to excellence for the individuals we serve and their families. Our teams have to come together and in a short period of time, make a decision on the best treatment plan, the best strategy moving forward. And so watching our team members embrace this intellectual conflict that turns into collaboration, the idea that we can push each other to build on each other's ideas and get to the best ideas again, so that we can do the best for the individuals and families we serve. It's really inspiring to watch our teams work through this.
Patrick Lencioni, who wrote Five Dysfunctions of a Team, Death by Meetings, some of those, Miles. One of the things that he recommends is that you mine for conflict, that it actually, that great teams necessarily have conflict, because if you've got two people, there are going to be differences. And how do you use those to move you towards excellence? And so if I think for a moment about how we might have an intersection between your journey of having been mentored, and this valuing of how do we mine for differences, mine for gold. We're kind of in a season right now in the world where we don't have to do a whole lot of mining for conflict. And we had a conversation with a group of executives a few years ago. It's early in the era of the pandemic, when there was a great deal of civil unrest happening in the country. And it struck me, you made a comment that said, historically we have kind of followed the traditional guidepost of saying, hey, at work we don't talk about politics and we don't talk about religion. And you were saying, we're starting to have conversations around how is it that we can actually go into these difficult places and have meaningful conversations at work. And so can you talk a little bit about that and some of the things that you have done within QLI to facilitate conversation in some of these more complex areas of life and work?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really have to give credit away to so many of the wonderful team members I have that led us through 2020 after the civil unrest, after George Floyd's murder, and the years beyond, who really helped us get to this point that we have these value oriented conversations that we're not having, because you don't typically talk about religion and politics, but by not having those conversations, we're not growing as a community like we need to. And so it was a blessing to have individuals like Nash Mahupete, who is QLI's incoming president and CEO, and several other team members, Kinyari, Kendra, Janelle, several other team members who were willing to say, hey, we can't move forward if we don't stop or slow down and have some conversations so that we can understand each other. And so I think two things really, came out of that, this understanding that we needed to be curious about each other. And that means that we need to be able to have hard conversations with each other. And then through that curiosity, we needed to honor that we're having conversations so that we can better understand each other, not so that that we can persuade each other to adopt each other's views. And I think that's so often why, in social settings or work settings, we tend to avoid having conversation about politics or religion, is because people come together and they're listening to persuade, not truly listening to understand. And it's a hard thing to do because, we're all wired to see things a certain way, we have certain beliefs. And so when you're hearing somebody who has a different life experience and different belief systems than you, it is a lot of work to set aside kind of your own belief systems and values so that you can truly understand where the other person is coming from. But, again, Nash and so many of our team members, Rudy, so many team members were willing to say, this is going to be hard, but we got to do it. So let's find ways to come together. It was during COVID. So, we were all social distancing, but the power of technology and Zoom, we were able to come together and have huddles so that we could have dialogue. We found ways to have one-on-one dialogue so that we could spend that time. We came together as teams, socially distanced and masked and all those things to make that happen. And, to this day, Nash and a team, our code team, following, what the chamber started as a commitment to opportunity, diversity, and equity. We have our own code team who continues to lead the dialogue and the education that needs to go with the dialogue so that we can continue to grow together, not grow apart.
It's interesting. I have a little post-it here that was a comment that an executive made during a coaching conversation. Was about a week ago, kind of working through some challenges. And the quote is, the obstacle is the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had it in front of my nose for about a week. And you have just given us an example of choosing to go through the obstacle, going through the impediment, going through that which is seemingly ungo-throughable, and figuring out how do we behave as the best of who we are and learn and understand from one another in a way that helps us navigate the complexities of life in the midst of really hard places. And so thank you. I'm so delighted that that's where you all went, and that you've once again served as an organizational mentor to the community here. You've mentioned Nash a couple of times, and we'll be talking to Nash later in the year as he transitions into the role of president and CEO. Will he be president and CEO of the organization? And it's another story of somebody who started close to the ground floor, isn't it? Or at the ground floor, and grew through the organization. And so Pat, this may be the last time I have a conversation with you like this as the president and CEO of QLI. I don't know what's next for you, but thank you for being so true to what you've learned from Dr. Hogeveen and from leading an organization that really walks its talk through the successes and through the hard places. If there's one thing you'd like to add as a final comment, is there anything that you'd like to kind of add as a wrap up?
I'll just say it's been such a privilege to be a team member at QLI and to be in a leadership role. And I think, one of the privileges and opportunities that comes with a role like this is having an opportunity to work with tremendous leaders all over the Omaha community, obviously including you, Janine. So I've learned so much from you over these past few years as we've engaged in dialogue about neuroplasticity and conflict and optimism and so many fun topics that just make me smile. So thank you for your tremendous leadership in our community and for being such a wonderful friend to me personally, to Nash as well, and of course to QLI. We so grateful.
So those of you who are listening and watching this, you have observed one of Pat's secret sauce skills, and she is always giving it away. She is always giving it away. And she even wrapped up with giving it away. Just a wonderful life and leadership lesson. Pat Kearns, physical therapist. I know that could be part of your dream going forward again to actually get into the very hands-on role of helping folks. President and CEO for just a little bit of the amazing organization QLI. Thank you so much for your time today, Pat. You're a treasure.
Thank you, Janine. Thank you so much.